Okay. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. You might want to consider scooting forward as I'm going to be trying to demonstrate a few things on the cube. So if you would want to populate the first couple rows, that might benefit you as well as me. That would be great. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. For those of you who don't know me very well, my name is James Hamory. I'm an intern here at the Armstrong Flight and Research Center. My father is also an employee here. His name is Phil Hamory, and he also does some of the things I do as well as some things I can't do. So he has his own area of expertise as far as the Rubik's Cube goes. I was born and raised in Lancaster, California, so I'm around here. I'm from around here, and I'll be studying communications at the Master's College in about a month. But enough about me. You came here to learn about the Rubik's Cube, and it's a hobby I picked up in October of 2008, and I've been hooked ever since. And one of the things that really interests me about it is that there's endless possibilities, as you'll find out in a few minutes. There's pretty much no end to what you can do with the cube. The Rubik's Cube was invented in 1974 by a Hungarian sculptor and professor of architecture. His name is Erno Rubik, and he always tried to challenge his students to make models, and he would make 3D models himself on his spare time. And one day he was playing around trying to make something that involved multiple parts. He wanted a mechanism that could support moving parts without causing the whole mechanism to crumble. And that's when he came up with the Rubik's Cube. We could try to figure the slides out. Well, this is more challenging than solving a Rubik's Cube. Tim, you might want to restart the presentation, see if that works. But anyway, the original Rubik's Cube, or the first prototype, was made out of wood blocks. Okay, I'll try to continue. Okay, so when Erno Rubik made the first prototype, he wasn't expecting it to be a puzzle. He just wanted that working mechanism that supported moving parts without the whole thing falling apart. And he didn't really realize he had a puzzle on his hands until he stickered it and scrambled it and had no idea how to put it back to its original state. All right. While we try to take care of the presentation, I'll talk more about how it developed. So in 1975, Erno Rubik got a Hungarian patent for it, and he called it the Magic Cube. In 1979, it was picked up by Ideal Toys Company, and it was licensed to be sold starting in 1980 in the United States as well as across the Western world. And it got so popular that in the Western world, about 1 out of every 3 homes had a Rubik's Cube. And it's been the most selling toy ever, basically. Let's see. The Rubik's Cube, it became really popular. It was all across media and TV. and television shows, movies, and Will Smith is famous for solving the cube on multiple occasions on television. The first appearance was on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where he solved it during his Princeton interview in one of the episodes. And that solve wasn't actually a real solve. It was fake, it was staged, and you can tell that by the camera didn't really show him solving, it just showed him doing the last couple turns and his hands were really covering the cube. If he was actually solving it, the camera would be showing most of the cube. But later, in 2006, he actually learned how to solve the cube for a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. And there's a scene in that movie where he's in a taxi and he actually goes through the entire solve. And that was unscripted as far as the position of the cube. He was actually solving it in that scene. It seems to be working. All right. Sorry? All right, okay, so we're back. So this is the first prototype. It was made of wood blocks and rubber bands holding it together. And as you can tell, there's only a couple stickers on it. And so he didn't really mean for it to be a puzzle, but it turned into one of the best puzzles ever invented. And the corners are truncated on the original prototype. And if you look in, or right here, you can see another one of his inventions. That's called the Rubik's snake. It's made up of about 20 triangular blocks, and they twist and turn. And you can, it's not really a puzzle, more of a toy that you can work into different shapes, like a dog, a snowflake, a cobra, or a ball. And that one also became popular. So there's Erno Rubik. There's the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode where Will Smith solves the cube. And then The Pursuit of Happiness, where he demonstrates and even gives away some of the secrets to solving the cube in that scene. And of course, Homer Simpson got his hands on the cube, and in his spare time, solving the cube, moving on to the next one. And it's a lot of fun. And even cats have gotten their hands on Rubik's cubes. I'm 100% convinced that is not photoshopped. Because my cat does it as well. Not really. And in the future, robots will be doing the cube as well, or maybe not so far into the future, as you'll find out. But this proves that even after all life on planet Earth is gone, Rubik's cubes will still be done by robots, thanks to WALL-E. The first International World Championship was held in Budapest, Hungary, where Erno Rubik was from, in 1982. 19 competitors qualified for this competition. There were national competitions in 19 nations, and each sent their representative, the fastest person from that nation. And you can go back and watch videos of this competition. It's pretty low quality. And the competition, compared to today's standards, is also low quality. People back then really had no idea how to run a Rubik's Cube competition. The format was best of 3, so each competitor gets 3 attempts to solve the cube in the fastest time, and the fastest time wins. And one of the problems was the competitors didn't get to use their own cubes. They had to use brand new Rubik's Cubes that were scrambled by a computer and put in a case. So before going up to do their official solve, they'd never touched this cube before. And the colors on this cube might not be the same colors on their cube that they're used to. So if you've ever bought a brand new Rubik's Cube, or if you've ever tried one from the 80s, they're incredibly hard to turn. So this greatly affected some of the fastest competitors. And some of the best competitors didn't even get close to getting on the podium. The winning time was 22.95 seconds. Which is pretty fast, but again, the competitors were slowed down by the state of the cubes. The winner was Min Tai from the United States. Whoop, whoop. One of 2 times that an American has won the world championship. And Min Tai went on to be the national champion for at least a year after that. But then cubing kind of died out from there for a while. This quote I really like, and it explains some of the key facts about the cube. This is a quote from Tyson Mao. One of the biggest pitfalls for people is they see the Rubik's Cube as 6 faces with 9 stickers on each face. Each of these stickers is actually connected to a physical piece of plastic. In other words, you can't move these stickers all independently of each other. So you're not solving stickers, you're solving pieces. And if you use the centers as a guide, you can figure out which piece belongs exactly in which location. So basically what you're doing is solving it in parts. And that's Tyson Mao. He and his brother taught Will Smith how to solve the Rubik's Cube before Pursuit of Happiness. So going over that, each face of the Rubik's Cube has 9 stickers. But the stickers aren't independent of each other. Each sticker is connected to other stickers on the cube because they're on a piece of plastic. If you look at this diagram, there are corner pieces, edge pieces, and center pieces. The center pieces are the ones in the centers, and they have 1 sticker. And no matter how you turn the cube, those pieces will never move in relation to each other. So basically, if you have an unsolved cube, you can tell people, hey, I already solved 6 pieces, because they're never going to move. The edge pieces are the ones in the center, or the edge, and they have 2 stickers. And so those 2 stickers will never separate from each other. So this simplifies the task of solving the cube. And the corners have 3 stickers each. This is what a cube looks like disassembled. So you can see corner pieces, edge pieces, and you can even see the core in the middle. So that might change your perception of what the cube really is. It's not solving stickers. It's solving the 12 edges plus the 8 corners around the 6 center pieces. This is a packaged Rubik's Cube, and the reason why I have this picture is I want you to look closely. It says the original Rubik's Cube, over 3 billion combinations, just one solution. 3 billion's a lot, right? That's more than I can count on my fingers. And that's more positions than I can even picture in my head. But is that an accurate number? Are they just throwing out an estimate of how many positions are actually reachable on the cube? Or are they just making it up? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's saying the Rubik's Cube has over 3 billion combinations is like McDonald's saying they've sold over 120 hamburgers. And we all know McDonald's sells more than that every day at each location. So I'm going to go into a little math here, and we can find out how many positions are actually on the cube. So stick with me. So there are 8 corners on the Rubik's Cube. So let's do some math. And if you ever took algebra, you should know what factorials are. So if we have 8 corners, and there are 8 positions we can put those corners in, if we take the first corner piece, we have 8 options of where to put it. So boom, we put it in place. Take the next corner, now we have 7 options of where to put it, and so forth. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that we can write that as 8 exclamation point or 8 factorial. Next, each corner piece has 3 stickers on it. So it could be oriented one of 3 ways. It could be oriented correctly, it could be twisted clockwise, or it could be twisted twice clockwise, which is the same as twisting it counterclockwise. Now, normally you wouldn't be able to just twist a single corner piece on a Rubik's Cube, but because of the new mechanisms people have come up to make the cubes turn faster, the corner pieces can actually move freely. Then onto the edges. There are 12 edges, so same concept. Where can we place them? Well, the first edge you take can go in one of 12 places. The second one has 11 options to choose from, and so forth. So we can write that as 12 factorial and add it into the equation. Then the edges have 2 stickers on it, so that means it can be oriented one of 2 ways. It can be oriented correctly or incorrectly. So we have 2 to the power of 12. And we multiply that out, and we get a massive number. It's 519 quintillion, or 5.19 times 10 to the 20th. That's a lot more than 3 billion. So the package was slightly off, just slightly. But are all those combinations reachable? Can we actually turn the faces of a Rubik's Cube and reach all 519 quintillion positions? The answer is no. Because let's say we have one twisted corner. Let's say when we're putting in all the corner pieces, like we're doing one and that has 8 options and the next one has 7, and we put one and we put it in twisted incorrectly. If we have one corner twisted incorrectly, no matter how I turn this cube, I cannot solve that corner. It's impossible to solve. So not all of those 519 quintillion positions are solvable. So that means we did some of the math wrong. We need to figure out how many positions are actually solvable. So let's go back over our math. The 8 factorial is correct, but the orientation of the previous corners affects the orientation of the last corner. So let's say I put in the first 7 corners oriented correctly. The last corner only has one option, and it has to be oriented correctly as well. If I put in 7 corners twisted incorrectly, the 7th one, or the 8th one actually has to be incorrect as well. And it works in sets of 3. So let's say I put 5 corners in correctly. 2 need to be twisted clockwise. That means the 8th one also needs to be twisted clockwise. So if I twist 1 clockwise, 2 clockwise, 3 clockwise, this position is actually solvable. That position's solvable, but one corner's not, and 2 corners twisted clockwise isn't. Or you could have 1 counterclockwise and 1 clockwise. That one's also solvable. So we can reduce this number to 3 to the 7th because the 8th corner is determined by the previous 7 corners. So it would be like saying 3 times 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 1 because the last corner only has one option. Same thing with the edges. If you have 11 out of 12 of the edges correct, the 12th one has to be correct as well. So we write that as 2 to the 11th. But there's a final thing that we have to consider. Is it possible to have everything solved but have 2 corners switched or 2 edges switched? That's the only thing you have to solve is just 2 edges switched. So here I have 2 corners that need to be switched, and I have 2 edges that need to be switched, the green here and the blue here. Is it possible for me to only solve the edges and leave the corners unsolved? Well, the answer is no. And this is something we call parity. It's impossible to only switch 2 edges without switching a 3rd edge or a pair of corners or 4 edges. So parity doesn't allow us to switch only 2 edges or only 2 corners. You would have to take the piece out of the cube, switch it, and put the other one back in the first one's place. So that gives us a number of 43 quintillion, which is a lot better. It's more manageable. It's still a massive number. And to give you an idea of how massive this number is, how long would it take for somebody to solve all 43 quintillion positions? Let's say we took 43 quintillion cubes, which it would take the entire island of the United Kingdom to make the matter to make those cubes. But let's say we had 43 quintillion scrambled cubes, and we had somebody who could solve 6 cubes per minute, so that's 1 every 10 seconds. And let's say they don't take breaks, and they don't eat, and they don't sleep, and they keep that pace up. It would take them 13.7 trillion years to solve every Rubik's Cube. Now, it's only one person, so what if we had more people? How about a lot of people going at this superhuman pace? If we had the entire population of the world solving at this superhuman pace, it would take us 1,958 years to solve all those cubes. So that's just to give you an idea of how many possible positions there are on the cube. Now you may be wondering why I have this picture up. And again, it's not photoshopped. I'm just kidding. I want to talk about a concept that is normally talked about when people talk about the Rubik's Cube, and that's God's number. Now, God's number is just a title, but what it represents a concept. And so the name came from, well, if you ask God to solve a Rubik's Cube, he would probably use the shortest solution to the Rubik's Cube. He wouldn't just play around with it for an hour and then solve it. He'd probably know the shortest solution, and he'd use the fewest amount of moves to solve it. So God's number is the idea that every Rubik's Cube can be solved in X amount of moves. And people tried for 30 years to figure out what God's number actually was. We're looking for a number that every scrambled cube can be solved in this number or less. So the first number thrown out, let's say, was 52. So somebody thought it took 52 moves or less to solve every Rubik's Cube. And so we're using quarter turns, half turns, and quarter turns in the other direction to solve this. And so we started with an upper limit of 52. Somebody proved that you could solve every Rubik's Cube in 52 moves. And we started with a lower limit of 18. They're thinking, 17 doesn't work. We can't solve every cube in 17 moves or less. So we'll put at 18. So we have an upper limit and a lower limit. And it took 30 years for these to meet. The 52 was lowered to 42, then 39, then down, down, down. And then somebody figured out that there's a position that could not be solved in less than 20 moves. And this position is called the super flip. It's where all the corners are correct, but every edge is in its place and flipped incorrectly. This is called the super flip, and it cannot be solved in less than 20 moves. It has to take 20 moves to solve it. And the moves are written on the board. That's kind of a foreign language to most of you, but I understand it. So and it's solved in 20 moves. I'll explain that foreign language later. We call it Rubik's Cube notation, and that's just to simplify telling people how to turn the cube. So people figured out, a guy by the name of Michael Reed figured out that this position cannot be solved in less than 20 moves. So that raised our lower limit. And then people worked and worked with computers. They divided the 43 quintillion into 2 trillion sets of 19 trillion cases. And then they figured out, okay, we only really need to check 53 million of those sets of 19 trillion. So they wrote a computer program that can check a set of 19 trillion cases in about 20 seconds. But there's still so many cases to go through. It would take 35 CPU years or computer years. But fortunately, they had friends at Google headquarters, or they went to Google and say, hey, we have this project, we want to work on it. Can we use your super fancy computers to do this faster? And Google likes innovation, so they let them. So these guys eventually lowered the upper limit to 20. And that gave us God's number, which is 20. So every scrambled Rubik's Cube can be solved in 20 moves or less. And let's look at this diagram. So how many positions are 0 moves away from being solved? Well, only one, and that's the solve position. How many positions are 1 move away? Well, 18, because, 18 because we can turn one layer 90 degrees clockwise, or we can turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise, or 180. So that's 3 turns we can do on one face. And then there's 6 faces, so we multiply that and get 18. So how many positions are 2 moves away? Well, if you multiply 18 by 18, you get 324. And the correct answer is 243. So there's some cancellations. Because if our first move is a right layer turn, and our second move is a right layer turn as well, that's essentially 1 move. So we can cancel that out. So doing cancellations like that, as well as cancellations saying, well, what if we do a right layer turn and then a left layer turn? Well, that's the same as doing it a left layer turn, then a right layer turn. So you can cancel that as well, and you get down to, there's 243 positions that are 2 moves away from being solved. And as you move down the list, there are more and more cases. The most common case is 18. 2/3 of all cases can be solved in 18 moves. That's 29 quintillion, I believe. And only about 300 million can be solved in, or can only be solved in 20 moves. And one of them is the superflip. Now, taking this knowledge of finding the shortest solution, how do we apply that? Well, we can teach robots how to solve the Rubik's Cube. You write a program that takes a scrambled cube, finds the shortest solution, and then executes it. And robots, unfortunately, have gotten faster than humans because we cannot just look at a cube and find the shortest solution. But robots can. So I'm going to show a video, and in this video, the robot is going to scan each side of the cube really fast and then immediately find the solution and start turning. And the people get really excited because that solve was faster than the human world record at the time. The first Cube Stormer, that's what they named their robot, could solve it in about 10 seconds. Their Cube Stormer 2 could solve it in about 5 seconds. And they made Cube Stormer 3, if we can go to the next slide. My bad. Cube Stormer 3, which they got a Guinness World Record, they solved the cube in just over 3 seconds. So the robots are way better than us. Isn't that a running trend? But these two guys, David Gilday and Mike Dobson, they made this, and they presented it to Guinness World Records, and they got the official world record for robots solving the cube. And I want you to look closely at this picture and see what they're holding in their hands. Well, they're holding the Guinness World Record certificate. One guy's holding a Rubik's Cube. And what is the other guy holding? Oh my goodness, what is that? That has 1, 2, 3, 8 layers. That's an 8 by 8 by 8 Rubik's Cube. So it doesn't stop here. So all this I've been talking about is just the 3 by 3 by 3 Rubik's Cube. That is an 8 by 8. I actually own one of those, but I didn't bring it. It takes a while to solve. The Rubiks company only released 2 by 2s, 3 by 3s, 4 by 4s, and 5 by 5s. But other companies have taken the task of building larger cubes. And the world record for the largest order cube is a 17 by 17 by 17, which we'll see a picture in a minute. I just want to look at the 2 by 2 for a sec because it looks easy, right? Only 2 layers. Well, it is much easier. There's only 8 pieces. It's only the 8 corners. And it only has 3 million combinations. That's a lot more manageable than 43 quintillion. And somebody did the math. If you fiddle with the 2 by 2 cube randomly 8 hours a day, you'll solve it by pure chance roughly 2 or 3 times a year. So I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody and they say, yeah, I solved a Rubik's Cube by doing random moves one time. Well, if they're talking about a 2 by 2, that's totally believable. But a 3 by 3, nah, they're probably not telling the truth. Because if you're doing random moves, you know, we already talked about this, it's going to take trillions of years, right, by doing random moves to reach the solution. So you can judge whether they were lying or not based on math. So that's Oscar van Deventer. He's from the Netherlands, and he builds puzzles. And he got a 17 by 17 by 17 3D printed. And he holds the Guinness World Record for the largest order Rubik's Cube. Now let's talk about the fastest humans, because we don't want to talk about robots all day. This is Felix Zemdegs. He's from Australia. He's not Asian. And he is undoubtedly the fastest person in the world. And to give you an idea, he's the only person who's won the world championship more than once. And he was the first person to even get on the podium 2 times. And he's been on the podium 3 times. In 2011, he got 3rd place. And then 2013 and 2015, he won the world championship. The 2015 world championship happened this weekend. And there wasn't really anybody fast enough to challenge him. He's undoubtedly the world's fastest cuber. And if you see the big pile of money in his hands, that's a ton of $2 bills. I was on staff at the World Championship 2013, and somebody thought it was a good idea to give out all the prize money in $2 bills. So he has a ton of $2 bills to spend. He holds the 3x3 average world record at 6.54 seconds, which means in a standard competition, you do 5 solves, you get 5 attempts. They throw out your best and your worst time, and they average the middle 3, and he got an average of 6.54. And when he got that, he was 1.1 seconds faster than everyone else. And out of the top 20 averages on record at a competition, he's done 19 of them. He's easily the fastest cuber, and I don't know how he's so fast. This is Mats Valk. He's the 2-time runner-up to Felix at the World Championship. He would have actually beaten Felix in 2013, but he had a 2-second penalty on one of his solves, and that actually cost him 1st place. He's from the Netherlands, and he formerly had the world record single at 5.55. The current world record single is held by a guy, Colin Burns, from the United States. He had a 5.25 second solve. And I'd show you the video, but people go nuts. People start screaming and jumping. It's crazy to watch. And you can see on his face that he was not expecting to get the world record that day. He's fast, don't get me wrong, but he got a little lucky. And then there's this guy, but we'll go ahead and show this video. I get my 5 seconds of fame. This is the inspection phase. Right. That was about 10 days ago, 2 Saturdays ago. Oh, thank you, thank you. That's just 6 years of practice. Yeah, so there's people called speed cubers, and a speed cuber is anybody who solves the cube with the intention of doing it as fast as possible. So you can average 2 minutes, and you can be a speed cuber if you're trying to be faster. So you don't have to be under 10 seconds to be considered a speed cuber. Anybody who tries to solve the cube as fast as they can is a speed cuber. And at one point, I was ranked 49th in the world for 3x3 average. Now I'm about 72, which is still pretty cool when you think about it. I'm world class at one thing, so I'm happy with that. I'm ranked #1 in Southern California. There's a guy up in NorCal who has a faster average than me. History of world championships. Again, 22.95 single in 1982. Then it just rapidly drops from 20 seconds, 15, 12, 10, 8, 8, 7. And the 7.56 average by Felix was actually his slowest average of the competition. He had a 6.97 average in one of the first 2 rounds. So what happened between 1982 and 2003? Well, nothing. Nothing really happened. The people stopped running competitions. There used to be television competitions on this TV show called That's Incredible from the 1980s. You can try to find it on YouTube. But how did it start up again? Well, this organization started In 2004, actually, the 2003 World Championship was kind of the catalyst to start the World Cube Association. And what the WCA does is they try to make competitions available to as many people as possible. And they try to make the same fair rules or situations for everybody. So a 10-second solve in America is the same as a 10-second solve in China or anywhere. And so it's a world organization, which is pretty cool. There's been over 2,000 competitions since 2003. Over 40,000 people have competed, and over 100 delegates. About 130 people represent the WCA as delegates. What the delegates' job is to make sure that the competition runs fairly according to the regulations and rules, and that if incidents happen, the WCA delegate has to make a decision and things. And there's 2 delegates in Southern California. I'm one of them. The other one graduated from Caltech about a year ago. And so when I go to a competition, I'm one of the officials, but I'm also there to compete. Now let's talk about how people go about solving the cube. There has to be some sort of method, right? There's a theoretical method that couldn't you just look at a scrambled cube and know the solution by memorizing all of the possible scrambles? Well, we already talked about how big 43 quintillion is, and so that's not really possible. It's not even really possible for a computer either. If we took every solution to every scramble, let's say we had a picture and then a picture of a scramble and then the solution written out, and we somehow could condense it into a 1-bit file or 1 byte. Now, normal, if you just have a small picture, it's normally what, 19 kilobytes, maybe 24 kilobytes. That's thousands of times larger than 1 byte. But if we can compress everything into 1 byte for each of the 43 quintillion, we would need 43 exabytes of information to hold the solutions to all the positions of a Rubik's Cube. And so that method of just, I memorize all the positions and I just recognize it and solve it, that's not humanly possible, and it's not really possible for a computer yet. The most popular method is the Friedrich method, developed by Jessica Friedrich. She was in the 1982 World Championship. I don't remember how she placed. I think she was 10th. But she pioneered this method, which now a lot of people call CFOP or CFOP. And I'll go ahead and step through that method. There are basically 4 steps. The first step, most people get a 4-piece cross. So I have 4 white edges here, and that's the base of the solution. This is pretty simple. If you have a cube on you, you could figure it out. It's only 4 pieces. And then you just build up from there. So we'll fill in the first 2 layers, and that's what the F in CFOP stands for. And so I filled in the first 2 layers. I have 2 layers solved. So that's the second step. And it can be broken down into subsets, like each slot of the cross is filled in. That could be a step. The next step is orientation of the last layer. And so we want to get all the yellow stickers facing up. We want to get everything facing in the right direction. So now I have everything except these few pieces around the side that need to go in the right place. So then just one more step and I finish it off. And that step is called permutation, because first we orient, then we permute the pieces. So that's the most popular method. There are other methods that can be just as fast, and other methods that people haven't really reached the same speeds as the Friedrich method. Some of those methods are block building methods, such as Roux, named after the guy who invented it, Gilles Roux. You build a 2 by 3 block, and then you build an identical block on the other side, fill it in with corners, and then do the last 6 edges. And there's also the Petrus method, named after Lars Petrus, who got 4th at the 1982 World Championship, I believe. And he would build a 2 by 2 by 2 block, extend it, and then go from there. And then the The method that Min Tai used in 1982 to set the world record was corners first, which is pretty straightforward. You solve corners first, and then you fill in the edges and then the middle layer. And that's what most 1980 cubers were using. And then around like late 1982, people started developing the Friedrich method, and that really exploded and revolutionized cubing. Jessica Friedrich's website said, solve the cube in 17 seconds. That was her advertisement to get people to start using that method. And of course, it's developed way past what she originally intended. So going back to the superflip, just to explain what those letters at the bottom mean, instead of telling people, OK, turn the right layer 90 degrees clockwise, we just say R. And if there's an apostrophe next to it, that's R prime. So turn the right layer 90 degrees counterclockwise. And then there's also R2, which says turn it twice or turn it 180 degrees in either direction. You'll get to the same place. And so there's R for right, L for left, U for up, D for down, B for back, and F for front. So that's how we tell people how to turn the cube. So this would be R prime, turn the right layer 90 degrees counterclockwise. U2, turn the up layer 180 degrees. And then B, and so forth. So that's a quick explanation of what notation is. And notation can be more complicated depending on what cube you're solving. So if you wanted to get started with a solution and you saw those letters, now you should know what they mean. So here, if you have a cube on you, you can try this algorithm. This will get you to the checkerboard pattern, which is just a fun little thing. So R2, turn the right layer twice. L2, left layer. And then U2, D2, B2, F2. And you get this cool checkerboard pattern where the colors alternate. And one thing I want to mention about algorithms is there can be more than one algorithm for the same case. In fact, there can be infinite algorithms, basically. All those algorithms solve the same state. They're just reordered. So there's not just one algorithm for a specific case. You can develop multiple algorithms for the same case. So if I performed any of those moves on the cube, it would resolve the cube. And so there's basically an endless list for each position, because you could always be dumb and do, OK, R, R prime, U prime. And that's basically an algorithm, but you're not getting anywhere. So we don't really care about those algorithms. A special type of algorithm are called commutators. And I may have skipped a slide, but commutators are basically intuitive ways of creating algorithms. And we follow the concept of A, B, A prime, B prime. So you can do a move. Let's say I do 3 moves. And so that's A. And B can be one move. Then I undo A. Then I undo B. I just cycled 3 corners. So there are easy ways of creating algorithms yourself. It takes a while to understand, and it takes some experience. But if I see 3 corners needing to be cycled, I can create an algorithm on the fly knowing that A, B, A prime, B prime can get me through as long as I don't interact poorly with the previous moves. So I can undo that. I'm going to check and see if I skipped something. OK. One thing I wanted to say was these algorithms lead to permutations. So like the checkerboard. In math, numbers are commutable. Multiplication and addition are commutable. So if we say 4 plus 7, that's the same as 7 plus 4, correct? And if we do 4 times 7, that's the same as 7 times 4. We can move things around, and it doesn't affect anything. And we can also do A, B, A prime, B prime on that. So we can do A, which is 4, we can add 7, which is B, and then undo it, and we get back to where we started. But on a Rubik's Cube, that's not always possible. The only permutation that's always commutable is the super flip. Again, this pattern keeps showing up. So if we put the cube into the super flip, do the checkerboard pattern, and then we, instead of undoing the checkerboard pattern, then undoing the super flip, we can mix it up and undo the super flip, and then undo checkerboard, and we get back to where we started. So the super flip is the only one that's always commutable. Commutators are generally used for fuse move solving, so if you're looking for the shortest solution, and you only have 3 corners left, or only 5 corners left, you would want to use commutators to solve that. And they're also used in blindfolded solving, which really amazes a lot of people. If you watch somebody solve a cube, you know, hey, that's pretty cool. If you watch them solve it blindfolded, that's a whole new level of like impressing people. And people think, oh, you're just keeping track in your mind of where all the pieces are going. Well, actually, it's a lot simpler than you might think. You memorize where all the pieces begin, and then you use algorithms like commutators that only affect a few pieces at a time. So I can memorize where everything is, and I can focus on only a few pieces at a time. So I can solve 3 corners, track where they go, they cycled. Everything else is still where it started. And so you can solve pieces 1 or 2 at a time. And so that's how people do blindfolded solving. If you're interested in learning how to solve the cube, I have a website that I used to use, and I still have documents on there, and I have beginner, intermediate, and advanced solutions to the Rubik's Cube. And you can follow that link. I also have paper printouts of that link if you want to come pick one up when we're done. So that's about it. If you have any questions, we can use the side mics, and we'll open it up for Q&A.
Hi,
Hi.
John. I'm just curious, why in 2013 did the guy from the Netherlands have that 2-second penalty?
Okay, so one of the things in the World Cube Association regulations are penalties. So let's say I'm solving a cube, and I start the timer correctly, but when I stop the timer, it's 1 move away, let's say. Or it's a little more than half a move away. If it's, let's say, only 20 degrees away, that's considered solved. But if it's over 45 degrees away, that's considered a +2 or a 2-second penalty. So when Mats Valk stopped the timer on one of his solves in the World Championship final, it was barely over 45 degrees, and we unfortunately had to give him a 2-second penalty, which unfortunately was the reason why he didn't win. So it was kind of heartbreaking because Felix has always been the fastest person, and somebody was that close to beating him. And Felix has been beaten before. He was beaten at US Nationals last year. He flew all the way out, and he was actually beaten by 2 Americans. So that was pretty cool to see.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I'm sure you could have 43 quintillion different questions to ask. It's a lot at once, and if you start with a beginner's method, you'll only be solving, you'll start with the first 4 pieces, the cross, and then you'll build up 1 piece at a time. It doesn't all just hit you at once. You don't have to learn hundreds of algorithms to be able to solve it. You really only need 2 to be able to solve it. So if you can remember, 2 8-move algorithms, you could solve the cube. I think we have, go ahead.
Is there a lag time? Is there a time where you'll get to 1 minute and then getting down from there is a lot harder, or is it?
You're talking about hitting walls and improving. There are a lot of walls that cubers can hit. If you learn the beginner solution, just the very basic beginner solution, it's hard to get under a minute. When I first started timing myself, I was about 1:30 a minute 30, and then I could get down to just a minute, maybe get under a minute. I had to learn an intermediate method to break the 1 minute barrier consistently. My first competition, I was using an intermediate method, and I got like a 36-second average. This is back in 2009. And then as I kept learning more things, I learned more algorithms to improve. If you remember the 4 steps, cross, F2L, orientation, permutation, there's 57 algorithms for orientation. You only need 1 or 2 of them to do the step, but if you learn all 57, you can do it in one look. You can look at the case and solve it. Whereas if you only know 1 or 2 algorithms, you might have to do the algorithm, look at it again, do the algorithm, look at it again. But if you know all 57, you can just look at it, instantly do it, move on to the next step. So the more you learn, the more shortcuts you can take. And I think I hit another wall around 12 seconds, and you just have to keep practicing to get past there. And I hit another wall at like just below 10 seconds, and I'm really only breaking that wall now. Like if you take the whole last year, I haven't practiced nearly as much as like the 5 years before that. But I've been practicing like this last month a lot, and I'm actually breaking, I'm starting to break the 9-second barrier. I'm averaging about 9.3, 9.4 right now. So thanks for the question.
Hopefully you can go out there and beat Felix next time, man.
I don't think so, but he's still a good couple seconds faster than me. But what I will be doing is in a week and a half, my dad and I will be traveling to South Carolina for the national championship. So that'll be fun. I don't really have a chance of winning that either. Hopefully I make top 16, because when you get to the top 16, they bring out the competitors 2 at a time, and everybody crowds around with cameras, and it's just really cool to watch the fastest people go head to head. They don't solve at the same time, but the room gets really quiet, even though there's like 500 people watching, and cameras are pointed at you. And so it's nerve-wracking for the competitors, because every 10th of a second makes a difference. Like someone can beat you by 1/100th of a second. And so if you're nervous at all, it can really mess you up. And so when there's 500 people pointing cameras at you, it can be pretty nerve-wracking. So my goal is to make it to the top 16. Last year I was like seated either top 16 or 17th, like right on the borderline. And I would have placed 17th in the semifinal if I hadn't gotten a 2-second penalty. The 2-second penalty pushed me back to like 22nd. But I'm kind of happy in the end that I got the 2-second penalty, because I would have been crushed to get 17th and not make the final. So, I'm not as mad that I got the 2-second penalty. It kind of took, because as soon as I got the penalty, I knew I wasn't going to make the final. So, any more questions? This is something I can talk about a lot, because I've been doing it for so long. I can basically talk endlessly, because there's so many facets of the Rubik's Cube. But thank you all for coming. I enjoyed myself. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you. And if you want a link to get the solution, they're down here. And if you want to ask me any questions after, I'm totally okay with that as well. So thank you. Oh, yeah.